Think about it.
Think about it.
Think about it. If I'm a priest of Israel, I believe Israel exists as a vehicle of God's plan to save the earth. And I believe the temple and the priesthood are central to what that whole mission is. Without them, there's no way to deal with sin. There's no way to understand God's presence on earth. There's no hope or holiness in the world.
And so then this young, cocky, blue-collar rabbi shows up with a mob that hero worships him.
He marches into the temple itself and acts like he owns it.
Owns it. More than that, he acts with ultimate authority, forgiving sins and calling God his Father. He makes fools of the religious leaders. He exercises strange powers that just happen to flaunt the laws that hold the nation together.
He breaks the law. He blasphemes.
He blasphemes. He rabble-rouses. He gives women and tax collectors and Samaritans crazy ideas.
I know he's a spark that could catch the nation on fire with blasphemy, or maybe even rebellion. And if God doesn't throw Israel into exile again, no doubt the Romans will ride in and destroy the temple again. Jesus has to go down.
Jesus has to go down.
Jesus had to die. For the good of Israel, for the good of the world, he must be condemned.
The Sanhedrin didn't do anything the best and wisest of our courts wouldn't do today. They didn't do anything most of our churches wouldn't do. They saw Jesus as a serious threat to their understanding of righteousness and order.
So they decided to take him out.
It's easy to imagine why they did it. It was the only devout thing left to do.
What if I'm Pilate?
I'm Pilate.
What if I'm Pilate? I represent an empire that is civilizing the world through military might and organization. I believe the hype of Rome because there's nothing else to believe. For all I've seen, outside of Rome, there's only brutal war, squalor, disease, along with these crazy Jews who think God can't be represented by an image, and yet believe humans are made in God's image. When the Sanhedrin sends Jesus to me, I don't want anything to do with him. I mean, he's obviously crazy, strange, off, and you bet he's the king of the Jews, right?
But when he says he's the Son of God, he's stepping on Caesar's toes. He's taking away Caesar's right to be the only divine Son of God.
But he won't give me any straight answers. He talks about truth, but come on. I mean, he's got to realize that power is truth, that Rome is truth. A zealous idealist is one thing, but usually they have the good sense to try idealism by the way of the sword. But this one thinks he could call angels to help him if he chose. But of course, he doesn't choose that. He's clearly cracked. But still, something about him bothers me.
I had him flogged, had him beaten, tried everything to break his will, but he remained faithful to what he believed in at all times. And I have to remain faithful to what I believe in. I believe the Roman Empire is the way. I serve it, I serve its interests, and Jesus is standing against his interests if he speaks out by saying he's the Son of God. The Jews know that. I can't put up with that.
They want him dead. They are twisting the screws, screaming that anyone who allows a pretender king to live is no friend of Caesar's. Okay, all right. It's him or me, and I have principles, but hurting my career for a carpenter peasant with illusions of grandeur isn't one of them.
The same thing could be said for the position I'm in Portland, in America. Do I serve the interests of the empire? Or do I serve the interests of truth and goodness and justice?
A homeless stranger could show up at my work, needing me to take the time to get to know him. But what if that somehow put my career on the line? What if taking that extra time was going to make me late for dinner? I would probably tell myself that he's somebody else's problem and wash my hands of him and have him move along.
So it's easy to imagine Pilate deciding to crucify Jesus. It was the only reasonable thing left to do.
It was the only reasonable thing left to do.
It was the only reasonable thing left to do.
Then there's Judas.
Then there's Judas.
Then there's Judas. It's so easy to imagine him staring at Jesus during the Last Supper and thinking, you could have been so great. You could have been the one. All you had to do was use your power, use your charisma, to use the money people threw at you and say, enough. You could have lived up to your namesake, the son of David riding into Jerusalem to conquer and drive out the pagan oppressors.
You could have cleansed the temple from the filth of Rome. Instead, you simply riled up the priests against you.
Instead of making allies with the powers, you made friends with prostitutes. Instead of teaching your apostles how to command fire from heaven, you wasted your time with children.
Still, I waited for you. I hoped in you. I thought you would wake up eventually after you had your philanthropist fun. I thought maybe we could all talk some sense into you. But you kept going on and on about your death obsession. Even during the last meal, I was hoping you would still change. But you started talking blood and flesh again, and I knew you would never change.
You would never change. You would always be lost in the darkness of your metaphors and the weakness of your prayers.
Yeah, Judas is infamous as this great traitor. But I see Judas frustrated by all the praying, all the waiting, all the soul stretching, and I get it.
And I get it. I feel him chafing under all the character building in place of any nation building. And I get it. I hear him crying for action, for economy, for someone to take charge and rock God's boat. And I get it.
And I get it. So it's easy to imagine Judas betraying Jesus. It was the only practical thing left to do.
It was the only practical thing left to do.
It was the only thing left to do.
If I was Peter.
If I was Peter.
If I was Peter, I would remember when Jesus talked about being crucified and I rebuked him. I'd remember the look in his eyes when he said,
"Get behind me, Satan."
Get behind me, Satan.
I'd remember the look because it would be almost exactly like the one he gave me when I drew my sword in the garden and he said, "Put your sword down. Whoever lives by the sword dies by the sword." Right. I told Jesus I would die with him. But I meant I would die like a man, not a lamb led silently to slaughter.
When I professed my devotion, it was to a master who outfoxed the rulers.
It was to the man who threw over the money changers' tables.
And who feared no one and nothing, not the demoniac, not the centurions, not even the raging sea. I followed a man of strength. But why would I follow a man of silence, a man of weakness? Why would I claim allegiance to a man who would not act with boldness when the time was right? If all he would do is pray and weep and talk in parables, but have no stomach for the sword, why would I die with him? Why would I die for nothing?
Why would I die for nothing?
Why would I die for nothing?
If I was Peter, I might not even have had the courage to draw my sword and stand with Jesus in the garden, let alone claim him later. I might have seen Judas coming and run from the get-go. I mean, the mystery of the cross was such a dark glass. It made absolutely no sense. Its humility looked like nothing more than humiliation. Its power looked like nothing more than a futile, tragic gesture of defiance. Why would I stay with a master who didn't plan on fighting back or even standing up for himself? How could I see standing with him as anything better than going out with a pathetic whimper?
It's easy to imagine Peter deciding to deny Jesus.
It was the only respectable thing left to do.
It was the only respectable thing to do.
And then there's me.
And me.
And me.
And me.
I can imagine why the best of our religious institutions rejected the Savior.
And me.
I can imagine why the highest of Earth's government gave him over to death without a fight.
And me.
I can imagine why Judas turned him in, or Peter swore he never knew him.
Not only can I imagine why, I know why.
Because as much as I like to flatter myself and pretend I would have done something differently, that I would have stood by him or stood up for him,
The truth is, even knowing now what none of them knew,
I can see myself doing the same thing every day without the same level of pressure or risk.
I deny him and his mysterious love power.
I betray him to more potent, practical saviors.
I stand aside when standing with him is dangerous or inconvenient.
And I'm afraid I even want to cut him out of the picture when he doesn't square up with the ideas of God I've decided are most important.
It's easy to understand how Jesus ended up on a cross.
Because so often I hear that broken voice in me whispering,
It's either him or me.
I am Judas.
It's either him or me.
I betray him.
It's either him or me.
I am the Sanhedrin.
It's either him or me.
I judge him.
It's either him or me.
I am Peter.
It's either him or me.
I deny him.
It's either him or me.
I am Pilate.
It's either him or me.
It's him. Let it be him.